You're all small though.
Yeah,
Switch that.
and I'm seeing your keyboard.
Keyboard? Okay, one sec. There we go.
Right, and I got an echo in my headphone.
Oh, let me just mute my computer. There you go.
All right, I think we're good to go. Close that. Minimize that. All right, make sure I'm recording. Okay, welcome everybody to CanHammer podcast episode 156. We are your source for 40K from the Great White North. Today we are talking about, so I made this title up, Jim. It's called How Team CanHammer Conquered Adepticon. You like that?
That's awesome. Yep.
So I have with me, of course, special guest tonight and recurrent guest, seemingly, because you're winning everything, Jim Vesal. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Jim, of course, if you haven't heard, because you live under the proverbial 40K rock, is this year's Adepticon 2019 Warhammer 40K champion, and that is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I did not expect to win, so it's pretty crazy. It's been a pretty crazy, like, 3 or 4 days since the tournament's been over. It's the biggest tournament I've ever won, so... And yeah, it's just been a bit of a crazy run. So I'm super happy with myself and super happy with how I did. So
for people who don't know, Adepticon is like one of the 4 or 5 big events of the year. So Adepticon, Nova, LVO,
SoCal or BAO maybe.
SoCal, yeah, BAO, SoCal, and maybe London GT now counts there, although that's not in North America. But right. 265 players, and out comes Jim at the top, which is awesome. And of course, Jim plays for Team CanHammer, and in fact, probably the only reason that CanHammer's at the top of the team rankings right now. And but this is not. You've been just winning everything, but you've flown quite under the radar in terms of quote unquote famous players. But I think that under the radar is ended now, Jim, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've only really been playing competitive 40K since like last year. So it's not like I've been around on the scene for 2 or 3 years or 10 years like some of these other guys. And I really feel like only in the last 4 months have I started to get to the point where I'm able to start winning tournaments. I've been a perpetual 4-1 player or 5-1 player like my whole gaming career, whether it was with when I played fantasy or whether it was with I always had really nice blue painted army, but I'd always never have that like killer instinct. But in the last like 3 months or so, it's really come together for me, and I really felt good about how I've been playing. So obviously this is a huge kind of culmination of the last 6 months of myself focusing on my competitive play, and obviously Adepticon. Like, look, I didn't even know about. I wasn't even planning to go to Adepticon, and I didn't really realize like how big of a deal Adepticon was until we kind of finished the tournament. So
humble to the end, Jim. Humble to the end. It's just one of the biggest gaming conventions on the planet. Yeah, it was great because this was my first Adepticon to go to. And I played in the 40K singles, but I didn't really do anything. And then I was off playing AOS doubles while you were in the top 16. But I kept popping in between games, and there was just this buzz and this crowd around the top table while you were playing, you and Juice, and and everybody was like, "Why isn't Warhammer TV streaming this game? Like, what's going on?" There's like a dude with a phone in the corner trying to stream the game, and so it was definitely, it's a little bit disappointing it didn't separate you guys out from all the other tables so that, there could be a bit of room. Probably felt a bit crowded for you.
I mean, honestly, first, I got to give a shout out to Juice, Stephen Four, who I played at the top table. Probably one of the best games of highly competitive 40K I've played. I've played a lot of competitive games, sometimes top tables. and he was basically like he was the role model for what a great opponent is supposed to be like. Also, shout out to Robert Munsell, who actually streamed the last, I want to say, 45 minutes of the top table game on his phone, cell phone. So if you want to check out parts of the game, it's actually out there. Check out maybe on competitive 40K. You can probably catch some parts of it. And then as far as like being separated, honestly, we were at the very front of the hall, and I'm super happy we were there because of the fact that they weren't streaming. Like it was nice to have some people be able to be there kind of with us. I know when you're streaming, you're kind of segregated, and no one really, there's lots of people watching, but there's something to be said for like having that team, that group around you, and everyone was super respectful. And to be honest, like I didn't even like I've been in that crowd a lot of times watching those top table games, and I always thought to myself, oh man, like I hope I'm not being distracting, or I hope I'm not causing them to feel like hard to concentrate. I didn't even notice anyone. It was just me, Juice, and that game. Like literally during that game, I didn't even notice one person around me. Like I was so focused on that game that like all those people around me didn't even faze me at all.
Spoken and so, like a true champion, man.
Yeah, and so like that was something that like I just felt really in the zone during that game, and it didn't bother me at all, and it was really cool to have everyone there, kind of when the game ended, and congratulations and stuff.
So yet again, before we go into talking about your games, yet again, putting Chaos on top, despite all the cries that Chaos is no good and Chaos is no good. I mean, you've repeatedly put Chaos on top over the new hotness right now, which is Genestealer Cult, and so that must feel pretty great to pilot the same army repeatedly and just get better and better every time you play it.
Yeah, I think it shows that I played that army all season. I think it shows that the missions and scenarios definitely benefited my style of army. And, my army list that I ran at Adepticon, it's a very toolboxy list. There's nothing that you can, well, there's maybe a few things, but there's not a lot of things you can put across for me that I'm going to look at and say, I don't have the tools or the things to deal with that. So I think with Chaos, you definitely have those tools. Now, does that make them the best of the best at everything? Definitely not. And there's definitely some very tough matchups. The game I played before versus Chris Blackham was incredibly tough because he had basically a very similar list to Alex Harrison's LVO second place list. I was absolutely terrified of Sean Naden's list. So not only is his list basically designed to table mine, but Sean Naden is probably one of the best players and one of the most consistent players in the world. The guy's made LVO top 8 6 years in a row. So that just tells you
he knocked out Kieran from getting into the top 16.
Yeah, and so that just tells you the kind of caliber of player he is. And obviously, Nick is an incredible player as well. He got knocked out early. So, I got a little bit lucky. The armies that I really didn't want to face got knocked out by other armies that I was able to deal with. And I think sometimes when you get into those kind of top 8 situations or top table situations, there is a little bit of luck involved, and it can be luck before the game, so it can be just luck of matchup luck. Yep, for sure. And I think a lot of people, a really good player can overcome that. But when you're playing at a really high level, two really good players, the matchups actually become more important. Yeah. So when there's a big skill gap, the matchup is less important because you can overcome a bad matchup with your skill. But at the very high level, when the skill gap is smaller, the matchup is more important. So it kind of reverses. And I think, if I'd played Sean, I think I'm a good player. I'm not near the caliber of Sean or Nick Nanavati, but I play Sean, and even if we reverse positions, just my army just can't deal with the things he brings. The snipers and the doom and the jinx and all those fun things. So definitely a little bit of luck to go into it, and I'm not gonna complain.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short, Jim. I mean, you've won a lot of tournaments, including Adepticon now, and everybody has the same good luck or bad luck over a seven game tournament. So you've got some skill there. It's not just all luck getting you to the finals of Adepticon. So don't sell yourself too short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, like, I'm trying not to sell myself short, and like my season this year was very, very difficult. Just 3 weeks, about a month ago, I made it to the top table at Barry Bash, which was about 110 person major, and I lost in the top table against a mirror list. And so shout out to TJ Lanigan for beating me there. And I remember, like, there's a moment that, like, I don't know if I just made a lot of mistakes, and I think that pressure of that top table got to me. And that was like one of the first times I've ever really been on like top table in the final round, and that was really crushing for me because I've had a lot of RTT wins. I won best overall, but I've never really had that like best general GT win. And then I went and did 2 in a row, which was amazing. So that and winning CanHammer GT about 3 weeks ago, that gave me so much confidence coming into Adepticon.
Yeah.
I really felt like I could win every game, and I didn't ever feel like intimidated by anyone that that set up across from me. I felt, I was good enough at that point to win every game, and that was a really good confidence boost for me.
So I think you only didn't score like 4 points like the whole tournament. I think you just 40-0'd everybody except for like one game.
I think I got a 26 on my third game, but I mean, honestly, to be honest, with the Adepticon, the way Adepticon scores, I wouldn't read too much into the 40-0s. Like, it's so easy to 40-0 people.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like it never really tells the tale of what actually happened.
Yeah.
You can have a really tight game where like neither army has anything left, and one player will 40-0, and it's just like, and at least with ITC, the other player gets points, so you can see kind of what he accomplished. With the differential scoring, you just end up these situations where, a really close game ends up at 40-0.
Yeah, for sure. I personally not a huge fan of Adepticon missions, but I can see, like, I 40-0'd one opponent, but didn't feel like a 40-0 game, right? So for sure. Lonely Sandbar just wants to tell you that they don't want you to get Chaos nerfed.
I hope not. Trust me, I wake up in a cold sweat every night hearing what have I done, thinking what have I done here. So I'm definitely aware of that. I'm hoping the lack of any GW like presence at the top tables and any lack of like any real drama with the finals maybe means that they weren't really paying too much attention to me and Juice's game, and no one's really like, I haven't heard any complaints. Like, I know after LVO there was like so many people were complaining with the Castellan. Like, they're like, oh my god, Ynnari Castellan, here we go again, and like everyone's blowing up on it, and no one has really said anything about Chaos and Genestealer Cults being in the top. The top 8 was actually very diverse, which I think was really cool. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I didn't get the Chaos in trouble.
Yeah, well, probably not, because they just released a whole bunch of stuff for Chaos. So I guess that'll throw everything into the mix. So, well, let's talk about your games, and you can go into as little or as much detail as you like. And I know you've already been on a few podcasts, so you're probably starting maybe a little bit getting tired of talking about it. But so why don't you go through kind of your games and kind of tell people what you're playing first. Most people are probably familiar with it by now, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say before we get into it, look, at home, no one asks me about Warhammer, and I don't win tournaments all the time, so I don't think I'll ever get sick of talking about Warhammer. So if you're listening, if there's other podcasts out there that are listening, I'm taking appointments for interviews and stuff. No, I'm just joking. But okay, so I played a mix of Chaos Demons and Thousand Suns. So I took Nurgle Battalion with 60 Plague Bearers and a unit of Nurglings, and then a Poxbringer and Sloppy Bilepiper. So that's basically the core kind of bulk of the list. That's the kind of board control staying power side. And then I took another Demon Battalion with a Changecaster, a Corn Prince with the Demonic Axe that basically kills knights, 15 Bloodletters, 25 Blue Horrors, and then 10 Brimstones. And then I took a 1,000 Sun Supreme Command with 2 Demon Princes of Zinch Armin, a Terminator Sorcerer with a Familiar, and a Hellforged Contemptor with 2 conversion beamers. And a lot of people ask me why I took the Hellforged Contemptor, because it's a very kind of non-meta choice. People, A, think Dreadnoughts are bad, and B, people also have no idea what conversion beamers do. And I actually had to.
I felt that beamer before.
I think I had to explain. I had to explain 8 out of 8 opponents what the conversion beamer does, because people are like, "What does it do?" And and it's a fairly complicated gun. So I usually would just show them the rule and be like, "Here, read this." But the Contemptor, it's 144 points, I believe, after chapter approved, which makes it super cheap. It's got a 72-inch range, so it can basically sit on any of your back corners and not move the whole game. And the great thing about the conversion beamers is they're super versatile. So the Contemptor has a 2+ ballistic skill, which means even Eldar flyers, it can hit them on a 3+ or 4+, which is still pretty good. But most things it's hitting on a 2+, which is amazing. And the gun actually gets better the farther away you are. So it gets additional strength and additional damage, whether you're over 24 or over 48. Now, the thing to know about Adepticon is that 3 of the 4 missions are on the longer style deployments. Yep. Only one of them is random. So I actually played 7 out of the 8 games I played were the very long deployment styles, which meant that Contemptor was always far away from everyone. It was always in a far corner, and it was really hard to get to.
You can't get
it only actually died. It only died in 1 game against our Castellan, obviously, on frontline assault. So that was a game where it was like, there's nowhere to hide, and it's okay if the Castellan's shooting at my Contemptor, go for it.
Yeah.
In addition to that, it's actually really good against things like Orcs, Guard, and Genestealer Cults. So if I need to kill Ravagers, Leman Russes, Wave Serpents actually can die pretty decent to it. Planes, it can do that, but it can also take out light infantry, because if you remove any models as a result of the gun, the unit takes 2d6 strength 6 hits. So oftentimes against a unit of Orcs or Guard equivalent, I'm doing 46 strength 6 hits on top of the 2 casualties from the gun. So I found it super effective, and it's got a 5+ invulnerable, so you actually have to put a decent amount of effort into and 10 wounds. So, and it doesn't bracket really until it's down to 3 wounds. So you got to do a decent amount of effort to kill it. And if you're shooting at my Dreadnought, fantastic, because that means the rest of my army is not getting killed.
Yeah.
So it's not the end of the world.
The sales of Contemptor Dreadnought is going to go up temporarily.
Yeah.
Based on your tech there. So you also did you add the blood letters in recently? Because I think that was pretty new tech for you compared to what I remember seeing.
Yeah, so I didn't run blood letters at LVO. I ran Sangors. Uh-huh. And the reason, I just found that they were just too inconsistent. Like the 8-inch charge on 2 dice is it's even with a reroll on both. It's pretty inconsistent. And I needed to fill out another battalion, and I didn't want to take cultists, which are terrible now. So, and I knew I wanted pink horrors anyway. So it fills a tax, but it's a very good investment. And a lot of people ask me why I'm only taking 15 versus, say, a 20 blob or a 30 blob. So the first reason is with 20 of them, 20 is usually the magic number, because it means you get can deep strike them for only 1 CP versus 2 CP. But then if they lose, and they also get the 2+ to hit. But if you lose one Overwatch, the unit basically loses that. And if you take 30, that's great, but then it's 2 CP to deep strike, and it's actually really hard to fit 20. I'm not a cheater, so I put 32 mil bases on my blow letters, not these 25 mil nonsense. But with 30 of them, it's really hard to fit them anywhere. Trying to fit a unit of 32 mil bases is really hard. And the other thing is if you have 15 versus 20, if someone wants to kill your 20 blood letters, they will kill them almost just as easily as they'll kill 15. If someone puts any effort into killing your blood letters, they will all die. 15, 5 extra toughness, 3, 5+ save wounds isn't really doing you much there. So keeping it at 15 keeps them super cheap. They're small, so I can fit them in weird, smaller holes. And if I lose them, And usually I only ever get around 15 in combat anyways. If you're lucky, like getting a full 20 blob all in contact is actually quite difficult as well.
Yeah.
I kind of find 15 is, for me, it's a good magic number, and the unit's like 130 points, so it's like disgustingly cheap, and it just adds so much. It has so much punch, and then it just dies. So I like to keep them nice and small.
Yeah. And then, did you have the pinks in there last time? The big blob of pinks?
I didn't. I did have them at LVO, and they were awesome this tournament. They definitely won me the last game. The thing about pinks, they're very resilient. They're really getting its hordes, and they're almost, I don't want to say they're almost as tough as plague bears, but because they're not. But a 4+ invulnerable, like, you forget how resilient that is. A model having a 4+ invulnerable. So I have one little last piece of tech that I love, and I keep 5 reinforcement points in my list, and that is for a single blue horror. And people are always like, well, what do you do with that? So there's certain matchups like Tau, and there's certain other matchups like where I'm playing a shooting army, where I want to be able to wrap. Even I want to charge the pinks in and wrap with them. And what the blue allows me to do is I can charge a few units, eat an Overwatch, lose 1 or 2 pinks, and then split the closest pink off into a blue. So now that blue is 2 inches closer. It's about 2.25 inches closer to the unit that shot at it, which means when I go to roll my charge, it's only a 6-inch charge. So I can basically turn a 9-inch charge into a 6-inch charge for 5 points. Oh, and that's like, if you think about, it's like a very sneaky little, and people see me do that and they're like, oh, okay. Because usually when you charge something, people are always like, yeah, I'll Overwatch, right? They don't even think a second of it. But then you pop up this blue, and all of a sudden now you're only a 6-inch charge, and they're like, oh, that's sneaky. And I'm like, yep. And then you charge in, you wrap them, and now all of a sudden they have 26 or 25 pink horrors spread out across the board, wrapped in combat, so you can't shoot them. And they're actually pretty decent in combat with strength 4 from the Herald. So so it's and it's 5 points. So it's like, worst comes to worst, he dies, and I don't think anything of it. Like, there's nothing else I can even take in the list for 5 points. So
mental note: don't Overwatch pink horrors. Boom.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty sneaky. Some people in chat are also saying it's pretty sneaky.
So cool. As far as the games, I won't run you through every game. I'll just kind of take you quickly through day one. So day one, I played Orcs in my first game, or I played Renegade Chaos, and basically what happened was he just didn't deploy right. I managed to kill all his screens turn 1, and then he had no screens left, and so my Bloodletter Bomb came down and cleared out all his characters. And my C-Beam Dreadnought, again, sat in the back corner, and he had 2 Armigers and a Renegade Knight, and it was just nuking them from the corner. And he didn't realize like how good it was until turn 3, when I basically killed an Armiger and 22 cultists with it in like a turn and a half. And he was like, okay, this thing needs to die. So that was a pretty, there's a game where like he just deployed wrong, and it wasn't very eventful. This was the only game though in the whole tournament where my Corn Prince basically duffed. He charged over the top of my screens into another Corn Prince, who was the exact same loadout. He hit 3 times, even with rerolls. Wounded twice, even with, on 3s, even with a reroll. And then the guy made one of his 4-up saves because he used Warp Surge. So he only took 3 wounds. And then his Corn Prince turns around and does 6 hits, 6 wounds. I feel 4 saves. The Corn Prince takes like 19 wounds and dies. So that was the only game where the Corn Prince kind of fell on his face. But every other game he was like amazing. So my second game I played Dark Angels Ravenwing. And to be honest, like every time I see someone with a full power armor army set up across from me, I'm kind of like, unless they're Deathwatch, Sniper Gilliman spam, or like maybe certain Custodes lists, I'm like, okay, cool. I've won this game. Like, there's no way I lose this game, because they're gonna shoot my Plague Bears with bolters, and then every psychic phase I'm gonna kill 20 Marines from smites, and there's just no amount of like strategy like that they can, like there's just nothing they can do against that. So it was a really great opponent. He was feeding me like peach liquor all game, so I had a little bit of a buzz. In my third game, I actually played a really scary Eldar list with he had, I think, a Hemlock, and then he had Ravagers, he had Harlequins, he had 3 Death Jesters, including one with a Relic Gun. and he had a bunch of Venoms and Jinx and Doom. So the things that my army doesn't like is Jinx, Doom, snipers, and it doesn't like tons of poison shooting, because that's really, and Ravagers. Ravagers, like Disintegrators specifically, destroy my list. So this was thankfully an endgame objective mission, and I managed to I literally didn't leave my half the table for the entire game. I sat in my half the table and I just castled up and I just let him come to me, and I psychicked him as much as I could, and literally he had first turn, so I just waited and tried to survive as long as I could, and then turn 6, literally just ran my whole army onto 4 of the 6 objectives, that the 2 in my zone and then 2 that were in the middle of the board. I didn't even enter his half the table basically for the whole game, and then just won the game on that. And I think that was a really tough game, and the guy's a super good opponent. I had actually played him at Michigan GT.
Okay.
And then my 4th game, I played Orcs again, and again, this is where the C-Beam really shone. Like, first turn, picked up like 16 Orcs, a shot at the Ludas, and did all my psychics against Ludas. The Horrors managed to pick up a whole unit of 30 boys basically in one turn, with a little bit of psychic support and a few other kind of pot shots here and there. So, this was a game where I was very worried, because Orcs are a very tough matchup for me, especially if they're like heavy combat. Like, I have -2 to hit on my Plague Bearers, but when you're rolling 100 attacks, I mean, that's still a lot of hits and a lot of damage. And Ludas are really scary for me, but he only had 15, thank God. And I managed to, in the first turn, use psychic spells to kill about 6 of them. So there's only about 9 left, which was very manageable. Because even if they're rolling a 3, that's 27 shots versus 75 shots with the bombs. So that was my first day, and I managed to get into day 2 basically in 5th place, and I was super happy with that. Ultimately that was my goal going to Adepticon, was getting into top 16, and I was happy at that point. Like, if I had lost my next game, I wouldn't have done anything.
So just so people are aware, the way it works is everybody plays 4 games on the one day. It's a super long day. And then the top 16 it was based purely on battle, right?
Yeah, it's purely battle points. Yeah. So actually it's funny, because Steve Pamperine, who was playing Orcs, went 3-1 when he came in 16th. But TJ Lanigan, who is another great Chaos player, he went 4-0. But because he had less battle points, he actually didn't make the cut. So he was like 18th or something. Yeah. So there was a few times that happened. And I mean, that's ultimately a battle points tournament. Yeah. That's kind of what happens. So you just gotta kind of keep an eye on that.
So, like the theme of the show is that Team CanHammer did pretty well. So you made top 16. Devin also made top 16, playing his Tau, Sniper Drone, Spam list, which is a nasty list. And Kieran just lost to Naden in the 4th game, or else he would have been top 16 as well. So did pretty well, filling the top 16 with Canadians. And so what did you do that night, like, to get ready?
Honestly, so the cool thing, so with top 16, the way that the brackets worked, I would be playing the 11th place player, because I was 5th. So you basically take if it's top 16, it's your ranking plus -16. That's the ranking of the player you're going to play. And the 11th place player was, it's asked to add to 17. So the 12th place player was Tyler DeVries, who had a quad knight army. He had a Castellan, a Warden, a Gallant, and a Crusader. And I saw the list, and I was like, there's no way. And it was progressive objectives. And it was kind of like my first game, or my second game against the Powerman. I was like, there's no way I lose this game, because he does not have enough shooting to really hurt me. And he has no snipers. And I'm going to have full board control. And my Corn Prince is going to go earn his paycheck. And sure enough, Corn Prince kills a Gallant turn 2, kills a Crusader turn 3. I killed one knight through smites turn 4, and then turn 5 he goes and kills a Castellan. So my Corn Prince basically by himself took out army. He took out 1,600 points of knights. Now, I'll be fair and say that I definitely softened up those knights a little bit with shooting and smites. I didn't go in to these full health knights, but he basically charged in 3 different knights and killed them all. So that was awesome. And yeah, that was an easy 40-0 for me. I think he had 1 unit of 5 Rangers left at the end of the game. I'd otherwise tabled him. So that was a really interesting game. My second game was against Orcs again. And this was the guy that actually just beat Nick. So this was a really scary game for me. And this guy had a fully shooting Orc army. He had 25 Ludas, 2 Gorkanaut and a Morkanaut, and then like 80 Grots to screen. Plus he had the Relic Zap Attack Gun. And so basically the way he played it, it was just 70, 80 Grots layered in 3-inch layers in front of his army. And then all the shooting in the back.
What was the tech with the Morkanaut and the Gorkanauts? Because that was unexpected.
They just put out a lot of shots, to be honest. Like, they're really hard to kill. They don't give up points. And if you're building a shooting Orc army, they just add a lot of extra shooting to it. And then they're also a bit of a combat punch. He also had 3 smasher guns. So he had a lot of shooting. And he sat in his kind of corner. I was lucky in that I got first terrain placement. And the thing about Adepticon is you get to place your own terrain. So I took this giant piece of rock that was about 5 by 12 wide, and I put it right in the middle of the table, across the, like literally in the middle line across our deployment zones. And then I put another piece of terrain that was very similar in each of the deployment zones, so that on my turn 1, there was nothing except my Dreadnought, which was way in the back that he could even see. Everything else was hidden behind line of sight. I took turn 1, which was awesome. Moved up all my kind of characters in this like bundle surrounded by these 30 plague bears. I deep struck my other unit of 30. And the reason I do that is because if I have, so people always ask me, why do I deep strike another unit of plague bears? So the reason I do that is because against certain matchups that are heavy shooting, so against Tau and against an Orc list like this, I only want to give them 1 target to shoot at, because if I give them 2 targets, then going to use my Warp Surge. So Warp Surge gives my demons +1 to their invulnerable. I have to declare that at the start of the shooting phase. So if I Warp Surge 1 unit of demons, they'll just shoot the other.
Yeah.
Right. And I can only miasma 1 unit. So when I deep strike a unit like that, I have 1 unit on the table which gets the miasma and it gets the Warp Surge. So now he has no choice but to shoot the -2 to hit 4++ unit plague bearers. He doesn't have another option. And so so it allows me to, and then also if he does say I have 2 units of plague bearers and he does 15 wounds each, well then I'm going to auto pass one of those, but then the other I got to roll. And if I don't roll that one, I'm going to lose another 12, 15 plague bearers, right? Whereas if I just have 1 unit, I can auto pass it. So if he puts me in a position where I have to roll for both, then it's a really tough position for me, because not only do I use 2 command points, but there's a chance that I lose a whole other unit as well. So that's like 45 plague bearers I could use in a turn. So
yeah.
that's why deep striking that second unit it can be important in those matchups.
I think that's a pretty good point, because a lot of people go into that kind of matchup with the mentality that I need to put everything in front of you so that it's hard for you to make a choice. But then often you're just giving the person more kills and you have to make more morale tests, and you can't buff and protect everybody, right? So
for sure. So this game, again, I got to go first, which is super important in this game, because it allowed me to move up my plague bearers, get them buffed up. I managed to psychic off, I think, 2 or 3 of the Ludas. And then my Contemptor picked up 1 unit of Grots. So I peeled one layer of Grots off. Actually, I picked up 1.5 units. And one of the really important points with Adepticon missions over ITC, and I think this is actually it's a nuance that I think is really important, which is, because you don't have that urge to kill one, kill more, you can be a lot more, you can split your fire a lot more, because rather than trying to overkill something to the point where it's completely dead to make sure you get the kill, with Adepticon, with my Dreadnought, I could shoot 1 shot each into each Grot unit, kill 1 Grot from each, and then each Grot unit takes 2d6 strength 6 hits. So my total casualties was about like 17 Grots, where in an ITC mission, I would 100% shoot both shots at 1 Grot unit to ensure that I kill it.
Yeah.
And then that unit dies, but then I only kill maximum 10 Grots. So in this case, I was able to split my fire and shoot about 17. And you can do that in Adepticon missions, is that instead of trying to delete units, you just weaken them or make them ineffective. And then because you're allowed to do that, spreading out your fire is a lot more important. So basically what happened was he started his shooting phase, turn 1. Of course, rolls a 3 for his Ludas. Shoots his Ludas at my 30 plague bears, which is really the only thing he can shoot. Picks up 18 of them in the first volley.
Nice.
And he looks at me and he says, I'm going to shoot them again. Do you want to just pick up your plague bears? And I said, absolutely not. You're going to roll it, right? Because A, we were on a clock, but B, I was like, I'm not, I'm going to make you roll it. So he rolls it. lo and behold, a single plague bearer survives.
Whoa.
So a single plague bearer survives the second round of 75 looter shots. And this is the only thing protecting 3 demon princes, Ahriman, my change caster, and my Terminator sorcerer from the entirety of the rest of the shooting of the orc army. So I'm like, please God, this plague bearer has to live. So he shoots his smasher guns at it, but remember they're -2 at this point, so the smasher guns don't kill it.
Yep.
He then has to shoot one more his Gorkanaut at it, because that's the next thing he has to shoot. Gorkanaut doesn't kill it. I think he only gets like 2 or 3 hits, and I make my 4+ saves. And so now he has to waste his Morkanaut on it, and of course the Morkanaut finally. Yeah, he's not happy. So the Morkanaut kills him, but at this point all his shooting's done. So my characters survived, right? Wow. There's one plague bear basically tanked. Yeah. So after that, basically, I just dropped everything down except my bloodletters, because I wanted to make sure I cleared his screens first before I tried to go to the bloodletters. And so the horrors came down. They picked up like 40 grots by themselves. And that enabled me to actually get my Corn Prince into his Gorkanaut and kill it in one turn. So he one-shotted the Gorkanaut. And then consolidated into the Ludas, which meant they had to fall back. And then with my Plague Bearers, I basically charged another unit of grots, and I just wrapped them. I tri-pointed them so they couldn't get anywhere. And I made sure I just had one in combat. So there's a small chance I could kill him, but it's not an amazing chance. Of course, thankfully, I didn't kill him. So I wrapped the grots. So at this point, I was very safe because I had killed, and then I psychicked off as many more Ludas as I could. So I think there's about 10 Ludas at this point. And the Gorkanaut is dead, and my entire army was protected by a unit of Plague Bearers that were wrapped. At this point, it kind of started going the other way, in which he failed to jump to pull the Ludas out of combat, which meant he couldn't shoot them because they were engaged with the Corn Prince, which was a huge kind of turn of events, because if he makes that to jump, the Ludas jump out, and then they got me down again. And so that was really big. And then that's basically what happened the rest of the game. I managed to wrap a few more things, smite out his Gorkanaut, and then all my characters kind of went in and cleaned up and jumped on all the objectives. So that was a really tough game. Orcs are super, super scary, especially those shooting lists. And I was just really lucky that I made a few 8-inch, 9-inch charges off Deep Strike to kind of keep everything in combat. And he failed a few really important jumps, which, like, there was one point where I had to dispel an 8, I had to jump on an 8, and I rolled a 7, and then I command pointed it into a 9. And I was like, I have to dispel the spell, because if I don't, my whole army is going to get shot. Yeah. And I was able to stop it. So that was really important. My third game, I played against Chris Blackham. This was probably my second favorite game. And he had basically a very similar list to Alex Harrison's. He had 6 Eldar Flyers, 3 Crimson Hunters, 2 Razor Wings, and a Hemlock. He had 3 Ravagers. He had Scat Bikes. And he also had Doom, Jinx, and a Warlock on Skyrunners, and 3 Ravagers with the Archon. So, and snipers. So he had everything I hate. He had snipers. He had Ravagers. He had Doom. He had Jinx. He had
how can you have that many planes and still have Ravagers and Psychics and
yeah, it was gross. So so I deployed super conservative, and it was endgame objectives, which was again the only chance I had to win was because of the fact there's endgame objectives. And I definitely channeled my inner Brandon Grant when I was like, okay, what do I got to do to win this game? And I was like, I just got to live and jump on the objectives turn 6. And then that was basically what I did. And I got lucky. He picked up 35 Plague Bearers his turn 1. So he wiped out one whole unit and picked up 5 more from the other unit because he Doom and Jinx them. And then, Disintegrators just obliterate, Plague Bearers. And then my turn 1, I just basically moved up. With the remaining unit, I managed to smite out the Hemlock because he got a little bit too close, so he could jinx me. So I smited out the Hemlock in turn 1. His turn 2, same thing. He kind of shot up all my Plague Bearers. I think there was 6 left after all his shooting. And considering, forgot to mention, I tried to Warp Surge turn 1, and he vected it and rolled a 6. And then I went to Warp Surge turn 2, and he vected it and rolled a 6.
Oh.
So yeah, so I got double 6 vected 2 times in a row, which was pretty devastating.
Oh man, that sucks.
But somehow 6 Plague Bears lived, because I don't think he got Jinx off because I was able to dispel it. And my turn 2, my Corn Prince kind of jumped over the top. He had two Razor Wings that were a little too close together. They were 5 inches apart, but both within 12 inches of my Corn Prince after I moved. So I declared charges on both. Charge one, fought it, killed it. Consolidated the other, fought again, killed it. So I picked up, and then I smited off a third plane with my characters. And then my Demon Princes and my Bloodletters came down, and they managed to charge 2 of the Ravagers. And I managed to pick up 2 of the Ravagers on top of that. So I managed to, in my turn 2, pick up 3 Flyers, 2 Ravagers, which was like a huge swing as far as like his offensive firepower. And with the Bloodletters, I was able to wrap his Archon that was hanging out with the Ravagers. So that allowed me to basically protect all my Demon Princes, which were now super exposed out against Ravagers. And then after that, I think it was basically like he just didn't have enough firepower to remove the rest of my army. He kept shooting at the Plague Bearers and the Horrors and ended up killing them all. And so turn 5, all I had left was 4 characters kind of in my side of the board, and then all my Demon Princes in his deployment zone. But just as I said, like turn 6, I jumped on all the objectives. I had 6 to 4 objectives, and he just like was like, wow, I can't believe you won that game. I managed to kill all the Flyers except one because I smited out another one in the following turn. And yeah, he was like, that was a crazy game. And that was a game where like I literally thought I was like, after turn 1, I was like, I'm going to lose it. Like I could lose this game very easily. But I think the thing to understand is like, don't let those early game kind of like losses or setbacks discourage you or make you think that, you know, you shouldn't keep trying. And I think that lesson really really kind of came to fruition in my final game, which was against Juice. So
before you go on, Jim, just to emphasize, like, so that happens to me a lot. Playing Custodes, I'll lose a bunch of bikes in the first turn, and I'm just like, I'm screwed, right? And then lo and behold, 5 turns later, I still have X number of things, and I end up winning the game. So, like, you're right, and it's hard to not get discouraged when you get, like, alpha struck hard, right? My other question for you is, and welcome Snoop and Tomb King, did you, because you must have known, consciously or subconsciously, if you're going to try and win Adepticon, you're going to face that flyer spam list. So did you have a plan in your brain for that? What you were going to do to deal with that list? Because that was the boogeyman from LVO, right?
Yeah, so I actually played Conrad at our friend Conrad at Barry Bash, and he literally played Alex's exact list, and I ended up winning that game, I think 27-26 in the ITC. And the thing is, like, Smites and Demon Princes can kill a lot of planes. And that's basically, so I wasn't really worried if I played the flyer list. The flyer list plus Ravagers, now that is a whole nother beast. If it was just the 7 Flyers, I think I actually would have been in a better shape. But I think the flyer list, the thing is, like, yes, you can start far away, but you eventually have to have some of them get close because otherwise they're all going to just crash. Yeah. So I knew they would have to get within my kind of death zone, which is 24 inches. And so as soon as they got kind of within that 18 inches of any of my units, the Princess pounced, the Smites went in, and I can position, so he basically gets no denies. So between my psychic phase, I can kill 1 flyer, and in combat I can kill probably 1, sometimes even 2 flyers. And the Corn Prince killed 2 flyers by himself, so it was pretty crazy. Pretty crazy there.
I think other than some very specific shooting units in the game, it's really hard to shoot those guys down. Like, you gotta, if you can combat them,
can you hear me still?
That's the best way. Yeah, your video frozen, but I can still hear. Oh, there you go. You're back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like, I think if you have stuff like Demon Princes or Custodes bikes or something that can beat those things down in combat, I think that's probably the easiest way to kill them, because they're not that tough, but shooting them can be hard because of all the negative stuff.
So that's where the Smites come in. So I was really lucky to have that.
Yeah.
So then my last game was against Team 4 Juice now. Final game. And this was crazy because, like, I never expected to be in the final. And I went up to Juice right before and I said, hey, man, whatever happens, I'm just super stoked to be here. Like, win or lose, like, I just want to have a really good game. We shook hands. We just like, we just were like, well, let's have a fucking fun game. It's going to be the final. We did. So
I met Juice at Adepticon for the first time in person, and he seems like a real stand-up guy. And so it was really cool seeing you guys play like a couple of really. Everybody knew that was going to be like a good game with no bullshit, right? Like, so I think people were very excited when they saw that final matchup for sure.
Yeah, and I got to give him all the credit in the world. Like, we played a super tight game, and I think there's both times in the game where we could have been, that guy and been like, oh, like, try to gotcha the other guy, and we both, I think we both took the high ground there. We knew, we wanted to win the right way, both of us, and not because, I mean, we've all heard of the incidents. I won't name names in the past. Players winning on, little technicalities and stuff. And I think, it was a great game. So he had a crazy Genestealer Cult list with about 60 acolytes.
Pure Genestealer Cult.
Pure Genestealer Cults,
yeah.
Including...
Some people out there who don't think Pure Genestealer Cult can work.
Yeah. And I got to give a shout out to my buddy Alex McDougall from BC here, because he was my kind of coach right before the game, because he plays. He's one of probably the top 200 players in North America, and I was kind of messaging him. I'm like, man, I haven't played Genestealer Cults since the new book came out. Like, is there anything I should know or watch out for? And he kind of gave me a few tips here and there. Nothing nothing that won me the game, but he definitely gave me a little bit more confidence. I was like, okay, he's pointed out a few things that I should watch out for. I don't feel completely blind. So I got to give him a huge shout out. Of course, I didn't listen to any of his advice because and you'll hear about that in a sec here. But, he definitely made me feel a little bit more confident, at least going into the game. So this game was really interesting because we played Search and Destroy. So I basically deployed my 2 screens of Plague Bearers along the line, and I just kind of tried to create a grid, basically, so none of his stuff could deep strike in, fit in, go through anything. He just basically had to go through these Plague Bearers. And he seized the initiative. I think he seized the initiative, or he got first turn. I can't remember. And he moves up.
Sorry, he was running acolytes, rock saws, the usual stuff. He also had a whole bunch of bikes with the demo charges. And some aberrants and stuff, right? He was also running Metamorphs or something like that?
So he had 3 units of acolytes. One was 2 or 20, and one was 17. They all had 1 million rock saws. And then he had a unit of 10 Metamorphs. He had 14 bikes, I think. I think it was, or 10 bikes, and then 2 of the big bikes and 1 big unit. And then he had a few mortar teams. He had a few smaller units of bikes, and then he had a bunch of characters of Patriarch, Magus, Icon Bearer. He had a few Brood Brother units, and then he had a few more units of 5-man acolytes kind of running around.
Yeah.
And he deep struck almost all his army except the mortars and a few of the bikes.
Yeah.
And he blipped a few of the other things as well. So he got first turn, and he put his acolytes back into deep strike, because you can do that with Genestealers. So on the board, he only really had his big unit of bikes and all his backfield stuff, so some Brood Brothers and mortars. He moved up all his bikes within 3 inches of my Plague Bearers, trying to kind of stop me in my deployment zone. And he did all the demo charge, the shoot twice, and I think he picked up about 14 Plague Bearers from the one unit, because it's got 4d6 heavy flamer shots between the trikes and stuff. So there's a lot of shots there. But I was okay at that point. I didn't feel, it felt like, I lost a lot of Plague Bearers, but it's not, not the end of the world. I basically knew I had to get rid of these bikes, so I charged basically everything into them, all my princes, smited them as much as I could, charged my Plague Bear so I could get that extra movement, which is really important. Sometimes it's good to charge. Some people think always charging, the role of charging is just to fight things. But for me and my army, I probably use charging more to move than I do to fight things. Because my Demon Princes and my Psychics are usually what does the killing. I usually charge just so I can get extra movement, so I can spread out. And that's one of the, I think, people always kind of forget, you should charge even if you're not trying to kill something, or even if the unit might take a few points of damage, if that means that lets you spread out a little bit more, right? Because you can always pull off models so that they're then the models that die, so that then your unit's out of combat again, and you're kind of done. You didn't really lose anything except maybe 1 or 2 models. So I managed to clear all his bikes, and I was like, okay, that's not too bad. I killed his bikes. And then obviously 40 acolytes showed up on my doorstep.
Yeah.
They all had like +2 to their charge plus reroll charge. He also had another unit of 5 show up. He had his Patriarch show up, his Magus show up, his Icon Bearer. So all these characters, support characters, showed up in the corner, plus these 40 acolytes.
Did he have a killer morph?
Yeah, he had a killer morph. And of course, so one of the pieces of advice that Alex gave me was make sure to not let anything get within 3 inches of Armin. Make sure your screens are really tight. Make sure you're paying attention. Of course, what happens? Well, the killer morph pops up, and he's like, Juice asked me, he's like, hey, is there a 3-inch gap there? And I looked at it, and I was like, well, let me check. So I grab my tape measure, and I start putting, there's a bunch of different units kind of surrounding Armin. So I start putting dice from the closest 3 inches, and there's basically like a little circle, probably around 32 millimeters big, where there's a ring of dice around it, where the Keller Morph perfectly slots in. So he slots in the Keller Morph, kills Armin in the shooting phase.
Boom.
He actually failed a Might from Beyond, which was really huge actually in this, and I'll go on later. So because he failed Might from Beyond, he charged both units of Plague Bearers. I went to Warp Surge, the big one, and he vected it. And this vect was actually going to be probably the big change in the game. So he was worried that his acolytes wouldn't kill all 30 Plague Bearers if he didn't vect it, because they were at -2 to hit.
Yeah.
And with a 4++, they're definitely absorbing a lot of damage. So he vected it, and he was so indecisive that he actually ended up rolling a dice and was like, on a 4+, I'm going to vect. On a 1, 2, 3, I won't vect.
He 4-upped his vect.
Yeah, so he rolls a 5. I remember, I was like, thank God he vects it. So he goes and he picks up all the Plague Bearers except 6.
Oh, so he didn't kill them.
No, so there's 6 left in my backfield that are like basically effectively out of the game. And I actually, I think I can't remember if I rolled for them or I auto passed them. I was one or the other, but there's still 6 left when kind of the dust had settled. And I was like, so this was the point kind of I felt in turn 1 of my last game where I was like, Armin just died. I just lost all my screens, and there's 40 acolytes with all these characters literally 3 inches from all my demon princes, all my characters, everything in my army. I was like, this is not looking good for me.
Did you get onslaughted?
I managed to fight back quite a bit. I did not get onslaughted, no. It was, I don't think it went off. But and my demon princes are leadership 9, and there's a lot of investment you have to do to kind of get onslaught working, so he didn't really go for it. So at this point, I was like, I got to go all in with all my deep strikers. So the horrors dropped down about 15 inches from one of the acolyte squads, and then the bloodletters dropped down 9 inches from the other one. I go to my psychic phase and my shooting phase, and I managed to smite off a few of the acolytes. My C-Beam Dreadnought is picking off his little units. So he has a few 5-man units of acolytes, and it's splitting fire and picking those up because they're just easy kills and clearing them out. And then my horrors clear 20 of the acolytes. So they had a demon prince near them, so they're hitting on 4s, rerolling 1s, wounding on 2s, because you got to remember acolytes are guardsmen. So I get something like, I think I get something like 29 wounds when all said and done. And then he obviously doesn't make that many saves, 5+ saves. And then my bloodletters go in and they clear off another unit of 20, except maybe 1 or 2. So there's 1 or 2 units left in the unit.
Glass cannons, those acolytes.
Yeah, they're fearless. So this one, I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good, and I'd managed to move everything so that all my characters were kind of screened again, so he couldn't, with the charges and how I moved my characters, he couldn't charge into characters. Then he dropped another unit of 17 acolytes. So I'm like, okay, round 2, here we go, and the 10 metamorphs. And this was probably the kind of TSN turning point of the game. So he charged his 17 acolytes into my horrors, which managed to kill 8 in Overwatch, which is amazing. Which actually sounds like it's a lot, but when you have 75 shots rerolling 1s and you're wounding on 2s, 8 is around actually pretty close to average. And then his metamorphs went into my bloodletters, and this is where the game kind of swung. So he fought first with his metamorphs, which I think was a mistake. Blendered my bloodletters, like they instantly died. I think he was up to something like 47 wounds, and I was like, dude, just stop rolling. I'm gonna just remove these models because they have a 5+ save. And then I interrupted with my horrors, and the horrors, because they're in combat, because they're near Herald and my demon prince, they still had about 26 attacks, hitting on 4s, rerolling 1s, and then wounding on 3s. So they ended up killing another 7 acolytes because you got to remember they're just guardsmen.
Yeah.
So he only had about 8 acolytes left to start at the start of the when he went to strike, and they kind of bounced off my horrors. They killed like 3 or 4. So so at this point, I basically killed all his acolytes, but the metamorphs are still there. So what I did was I smited out all those acolytes that were in combo with my horrors. That enabled my horrors to be free in the shooting phase to then shoot at the metamorphs, which were about 16 inches away. So I managed to pick up all the metamorphs because I still had about something like 60 something shots at that point from the horrors. So they picked up all the metamorphs, and I kind of looked at the board at this point, and I was like, this was the first time in the game where I was like, this is my bottom of my turn 3. I was like, hey, like I think I'm not in as bad shape as I thought I was 2 turns ago, and
well, it's just what characters left at this point for him.
Yeah. So in the same turn, also my Corn Prince picked up his Patriarch because I charged it with the Corn Prince. It did 14 wounds to it. Picked it up, and then I looked around and I was like at the bottom of my 3rd turn, and I was like, I don't think he has enough left to kill my Demon Princes. Mm-hmm. Like he had a few 5-man stragglers of acolytes left, kind of here and there. He had all these little characters, which now my Demon Princes were going to go carve through, which they did in the next turn. They basically picked up all those little, the minor characters between smites and combat. And then there's a few straggling units of Brood Brothers around the board that my team started to pick up. And then the kind of final play that I think won me the game was he had a Clam of Us on the middle objective, and I managed to move my horrors up towards them, charge it, wrap it, and then in that wrap get closer to the objective. So now I had this unit of about, I think there's 8 left, horrors in the middle, pink horrors, wrapping one of his characters on an objective that was stopping him from shooting all my characters, because all my other infantry was dead. Yeah. All those left as characters, but 3 of them were Demon Princes. So he couldn't shoot at the horrors because they're in combat, and he couldn't shoot at my Demon Princes because they were behind the horrors, and they were just running around, clearing off things, smiting things, killing things. And then I think he looked at the table around start of his turn 6. We kind of counted it, and he just shook my hand because it was end of game, or it was progressive objectives, but I would have gotten 8 more. I basically had 5 objectives starting turn 6, so I would have had enough points at that point to win the game. So yeah, it was we shook hands, and it was a super crazy game. Yeah. But that was my tournament. So
awesome. Well, congratulations. It was epic, and when we heard, like, I was following the progress on like BCP and stuff, and there was a lot of, maybe more on our side, it was more of a Canada versus USA game. Yeah. And it was just amazing to have a Canadian win Adepticon and a Team CanHammer member as well. And because I'd been ribbing Nick Nanavati about CanHammer versus Beast Coast for a while, and off of your shoulders, of course. And then I'm like, Jim just won Adepticon, I guess we're staying on top. And so it was awesome. And so big congratulations to you. You must still be on a pretty big high from that.
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy because like my ITC score hasn't updated yet. They haven't submitted scores, but I'll be like 120 points past first place once it updates. So that's going to kind of keep me on the top for a little while. And
awesome.
It's actually funny. So I was looking through all the tournaments that I had planning to go this year, and I canceled 2 of them because I was like, well,
you can't do any better.
I was like, I can't do any better. And like, I think at this point, like, if I want to do, like, I still want to go to a lot of tournaments, but I don't necessarily need them all. Like I canceled this RGT I was going to go to. I was like, what's the point at this point? Like, it's just not going to feel the same. And then, so it was super crazy. I won Best Chaos on the first day, obviously won the championship. And then actually my team, so shout out to the guys at Beef and Wing who adopted me for the team tournament. Mm-hmm. We actually won Best Chaos for the team tournament, which was crazy too, because we went like 2 and 3. But I guess because my army was painted at such a high level, the soft scores kind of carried us through. So, and that's not to brag. It was just a pretty crazy experience. So that was really awesome. And I guess now I have to go back next year because I got to defend my championship. So
you got to defend.
Yeah.
So the next day you were playing team, right? Team 40K on the Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And of course, Team CanHammer won Best General at the team.
Yeah.
Chris,
congratulations.
Kieran and Sparks,
Yeah, congratulations, guys. That's
which
awesome.
Which is awesome. They ran 12 or 15 repulsors in
G-Man. Yeah, we played
them.
We played them in round 3, and it was not enjoyable. But I mean, that's what you got to do. What you got to do, right? So
yeah. So, and I know that Chris couldn't be here tonight, but he put a lot of. Well, they basically decided to play that army like 6 weeks ago, and they just bashed that together and painted it actually to a pretty high standard. Chris was been making that board for the last 4 weeks, and somehow we got it there to Chicago. So
yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, so I know he wanted to talk about that tonight, so we'll give him a shout out on that. So so overall, and I know in the AOS side, Rahul came in 6th or 7th overall in the AOS singles, so it was a good showing for Canada from all the events. Jeff and his crew, what are they called? I can't remember the name, but he has like 16-20 guys from Durham region, Toronto, who played Night Vault. And he came in 5th only on tiebreakers, so he went undefeated in the Night Vault. So everybody did great at Adepticon. So it was a super awesome weekend. But yeah, yours was certainly a crowning achievement, man.
Yeah, now I'm like, well, how do I top this? Because I actually won. I won my last 2 tournaments I've entered. I won DiceHammer GT like 3.5 weeks ago, and I just won this. So now it's like I haven't lost a tournament game in 13 games, and I have a GT in 2 weeks, and I have a major, a 100-person major the following weekend. So now it's like I got a target on my back. Everyone's been messaging me that they're coming for me. So everyone's gonna be writing lists to counter mine because they think I'm this big shot now, even though I still don't believe that I won.
So I guess you'll be a CanHammer team as part of ETC Team
West Coast. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because you're a whole. I think this might have solidified your spot on Team Canada. I don't know. I'm not part of that decision making process.
Yeah,
but it's gonna be like, wow, do we take Jim or I don't know. But so that would mean that ETC would be a big event for you sometime in the summertime.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, and then of course there's Capital City. You got to come and try and take the trophy from Scary.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna be tough. I really want to go to Nova as well this year. I went last year and it was an amazing event. And I think the ETC it's basically like ETC, Capital City, and the Nova all in August. So that's gonna be an interesting. To pull that off is gonna take a little bit of creativity on my end.
Yeah, just make one like flight loop.
Yeah, one big Warhammer World Tour, basically.
Exactly. You should go on a World Tour. You need some sponsorship, man. Like like proper sponsorship. Someone to pay you to go places and play stuff. You start a coaching service.
No, I got too much going on. So.
And I think your pizza place was featured on like top 10 in Toronto or something. I read somewhere.
Yeah, we get some random coverage here and there. I don't really know who's responsible for those things. So sometimes I feel like they're just trying to create clickbait. So it's so.
So let's say. So what are you going to do with your list at this point? Nothing. Is this perfect?
Look, I'm always looking to improve, and I think if you're a good tournament player and you don't look at ways to improve, the iteration it is now was a direct response to my games in LVO and my games at Barry Bash, and I made adjustments to fix holes in the list for either the games that I found really difficult or the games that I found like I didn't have an answer to. And what I found is in the last 13 games, I never felt there's a list that I didn't have an answer to, or I didn't have tools to at least deal with it, or at least get me to the point where I didn't feel like I was just helpless. So I'm not going to make any changes right now. I'm going to play this list probably until I lose, to be honest. I think that's probably a good measure. And right now I'm really focused on looking at all the new Chaos stuff.
Yeah.
And especially I've been looking really hard at the Demon Engines and Vigilus and the new Black Legion stuff. And I think there's a few nuggets in there that are kind of undiscovered that I think people haven't really put together yet. And I want to basically do a kind of Chaos Space Marine direction, and it'll be totally different than my current list, because my current list I have around 130 models, And let me tell you, it's super exhausting to play.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's exhausting to move. It's exhausting to set up. It's exhausting to break down.
Yeah.
It can be really difficult, and especially over like these big tournaments. Like I was dying after game 4, day 1 and 2. I was just so exhausted.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited to play a more kind of like in your face. And my army is a very it's a very kind of, I don't want to call it a slow army in the sense of speed, but it's slow in tempo. Yeah. Like it slows the game down and it really kind of brings everything to a crawl. And it's very like, it's all about like kind of attrition and over time doing things, right? So I'm excited to play an army of like multiple demon engines where I can literally just run everything at you as fast as possible, shove them in your face, roll 1,000 dice, and just have everything explode. So I'm looking at a few lists right now, and I think I put together a pretty nasty little demon engine list that I just got to basically purchase and paint at this point, which could take up to 6 months knowing my painting, but I'm excited to get that on the table as soon as possible. So
yeah,
that's going to be my focus.
My third game, I played a dude running 3 Mauler Fiends, a Baden, and some other stuff. And those 3 Mauler Fiends hit my bike line like first turn, and those guys have a lot of attacks, and with all the psychic buffs on them, those guys are freaking scary. So I can imagine if there's this Lord dude who's gonna buff them up.
Oh yeah,
that's gonna wreck some shit.
Yeah, I want to run 3 of them. So
yeah. So I think you're right. I think there's definitely play there, and that's certainly a different style army than you have now.
For sure.
So that was one of my questions was, what do you think of the new stuff? The other question is, do you think you're gonna get affected by the FAQ at all? Other than it affecting other people.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, knock on wood, I don't think anything in the Chaos book, so to speak, are so strong right now. I think the Castellan, I know Yunari is getting the update in next month's White Dwarf, so I'm really interested to see which direction they go with that, if it's going to be more like Sisters of Battle, or if they're going to do something completely different. And I think, obviously, everyone knows the Castellan is, it's been said on certain podcasts with certain people that are certain playtesters that it's coming. Like, there's no doubt about it. I think a lot of people are also saying that it's not going to be a huge nerf, so it's not all of a sudden going to be unplayable. But which I would prefer. Like, I prefer the changes to be subtle and over time versus kind of crazy. I'm hoping that I didn't do anything in this tournament that's going to cause the hammer to come down on Chaos, because I'll never hear the end of it. But
as you say, they weren't really paying attention.
Yeah, and I think I think Chaos is pretty safe, unless there's like changes like the fly change, which was kind of like a change that kind of had a ripple effect, and it wasn't necessarily like a change in army, but it was like literally a 1-sentence change buried in like page 2 of the rulebook FAQ that literally changed completely the entire meta.
Yeah.
So if this is something like that, where like it's subtle and there's just a clarification, and then all of a sudden there's a ripple effect on the rest of the meta, I'm pretty sure Chaos is going to be safe. But don't quote me on that, please.
And what do you think of the new best in faction changes for ITC?
So
I'll just ask you all the hard-hitting questions right now.
No. I like them, and I think it's good. And the reason I like it specifically is because so let me backtrack. The selfish part of me, the competitive gamer in me, doesn't like them, because I want to be able to win things as easily as possible without having to, play a pure list. I'm never going to play a pure list. I'll tell you that right now. As long as I can soup, unless they make it so beneficial to play a pure list, I'm always going to take, as a competitive player, I'm always going to take the best things from the best books and create the best combos. And that's what every competitive player that wants to win an Adepticon, a Nova, or an LVO needs to do. You're not going to win these big tournaments with a handicap list. So that's the first thing. On the flip side, I think it's what I like about it is you're going to now have 2 groups of players. You're going to have those ultra competitive suit players, which I think are actually a small proportion of the population, gaming population, that are always going to take the best thing. They don't care about faction. They don't care about the fluff.
I mean, the vote numbers themselves would confirm that that's a small population of players.
Yeah, and I voted to keep it the way it is, just to be full disclosure, because of course I want all the advantage. But I think what's cool is I think we're going to see a whole new meta of pure lists emerge, which I always think if there's something that they can do to shake up the meta, that's cool. At the end of the day, to be honest, I didn't actually realize that many people cared about Best in Faction or even thought that they were going to get it. Like, realistically, say you play pure Space Marines currently, and you were upset that a soup list was winning Best Space Marines. Unless you're like the top 2 or 3 Space Marine players in the country or in the ITC, you being pure Space Marines doesn't really matter because you're not good enough to win those tournaments to win that award anyways.
And you went to LVO.
So it doesn't really affect you at all, right? So that change makes no difference. And so really all it does is, I think what it's going to be cool is to see if some of the really good players transition into pure faction. And that I think is going to be the biggest change that I'm interested to see. And then I'm also interested to fight for best chaos, like not some weird off faction, but like the best chaos. Now that's my category. So now it's like, okay, I gotta go beat face. And I think basically if you win any of the best in any of the soup factions, you're probably either top 5 in LVO top 5 in the ITC, because in order to win one of those factions, you're probably gonna have to be top 10 player to begin with. That's not going to go to, random players. So I'm pretty happy with them.
I'm excited to see what people come up with if they decide to go pure, because now you might see people using things that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, and there might be some cool stuff there that people just not delved into because the obvious choice was to combo it in a soup with something else. So I think that would be very interesting. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out in like a 100-person tournament, whether you end up with all the soups at the top and all the pures at the bottom, or if it's going to be mixed up. Obviously, some factions can't soup. Orcs, as an example, in Tau. But it'd be interesting to see just in the individual tournaments whether that ends up being a thing. Maybe we'll get Peter to see if he can start to pull that out of the statistics with this change. But
so one just to give you kind of a funny example. So because the change is into effect until for another week, all my current scores. So I'll have 4 out of 5 scores that'll be Chaos Demons. And I literally was thinking today, I was like, okay, if I have 4 out of 5 scores Chaos Demons, but then now it's gonna my scores, 1 including Adepticon and 1 including another GT win, so I'm probably already going to be quite a lot of points with the pure for Chaos Demons. If I can maybe play one more tournament as a pure demon list after this change and get like a top 10 finish, I could probably win Chaos Demons factions and then just play soup for the rest of the year, because now I've won these huge tournaments with soup, but they're still counting as a certain faction. So if it ends up happening that way, I'm going to feel bad for whoever tries to kind of come after me, because I'm going to have such a huge lead in Chaos Demons with Adepticon that they're going to feel like it's really unfair. So, but I was like, okay, so if I drop my 1,000 Suns and I put in more demons, what could I put in that would make that list good for 2,000 points? So it's even got me thinking of playing pure lists. So, I mean, even though I just said I'd never do that.
You never know. You never know. Yeah. So it's I'm indifferent. I'm not in the running for best of anything, and I like to play pure Custodes, and whether maybe that means some of my soup competition drops away. I don't know. Whatever. It's not a big deal for me. And the other thing is, like, they changed the score formula, so LVO is worth less, and winning other tournaments might be worth a bit more. So
yeah, that's actually something that I'm not. So, and this will sound pretty thick coming from the Adepticon winner. So I won CanHammer GT in LA, like the start of February, or end of February, start of March, and I think it was a 42 or 48 person GT. And for that, winning that whole GT, 5 games, 48 players, I got 207 ITC points. I just won Adepticon, which is 8 rounds, 256 players, and I only got 267 points.
Yeah.
So I actually think the pendulum swung a little bit too far the other way, in that I just want a tournament that's almost double the length with quadruple the players, and I only got about 15-20% more points. So I actually feel like the formula has gone too far in the other way, and I think it needs to maybe make maybe a little bit more points for a tournament that size, especially considering it's almost double the amount of rounds and it's quadruple the amount of players, 5 times the amount of players basically. So I feel like, I won this Adepticon and I'm like, man, I only got 60 more points than Dice Hammer, that seems kind of lame. So that's my one complaint so far.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll tweak it again after a little bit of time, but then they're not going to go back and change the previous points. So it probably comes out in the wash at the end of a long tournament if you play as many tournaments as you do. Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting change.
Well, I think what that means is like the scores are going to be a lot more competitive till the end of the season, because even though I won Adepticon, if I go and win, say, another GT or major, I'm still going to be in that mid 200s. Whereas before, those guys are not getting touched all. The guy that won Adepticon is not getting touched all season.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Now, if someone wins 5 GTs and I got 4 GTs and say a major, or so 4 GTs and say like an RTT, they'll still potentially have more points than me. So I think actually it's going to be way more competitive in the rankings, and there'll be a lot more shuffling around throughout the season.
Yeah, Lonely Sandbar saying it rewards consistent performance rather than spikes in performance. That one GT win or something like that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, so next for you, Jim, will be maybe you'll skip out on some smaller events, but I will be seeing you at CanHammer Team.
Yep, I have over a month. I have a Warriors weekend in Victoria, BC in 2 weeks, and West Coast GT, which is called West Coast GT, but it's actually a major. This year we're up to I think 98 players, which is crazy for Vancouver.
Awesome.
That's in the following week, and then basically I'm off to Ottawa for the Canadian CTCC. I don't know what it stands for. Canadian Tabletop Championships, and then the CanHammer Team Tournament the week after. So I'll be kind of doing the East Coast loop after that. So and then I'll be at BAO. So if you're at BAO, I'll see you guys there.
Okay.
And
doesn't
that's
seem
basically
like you're missing any tournaments, man.
Yeah. No, actually, so the reason I dropped 2 is because I actually looked at my schedule, and basically starting the Warriors weekend, if I didn't drop some, I would have 9 tournaments in a row, 9 weekends in a row.
I just thought you figured out that you can't do 2 on the same weekend.
No, I was like, oh my god, this is like I put them all in front of me, and I was like, this is actually absurd, and I'm gonna be homeless after this because. So I was like, I need to lay off a little bit and not burn myself out. So there's probably one more I'll drop in there as well. So
awesome,
not sure
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me, Jim. Congratulations to you again on your victory. And doing it for Team CanHammer, your shoulders must be getting sore. Your back must be a little bit sore from us all climbing on top of you.
That's all good.
But we'll take it. And your shirt is in the mail if you haven't received it already.
All right. Well, I haven't been home yet, so I get home on Monday.
True.
So
that's true.
Hopefully it's there waiting for me.
And thank you very much, everybody, for watching and subscribing and on Patreon and supporting the channel. Thank you very much. And sorry, we were in recovery mode this week, so there were no streams this week. And it's actually, even though I didn't play as much as you did, like it's just tiring.
It's tough. I mean, I played 15 games in I played 8 games in 2 days, and I think like from 8 a.m. to like it's 36 hours of being awake, and I think I slept for 10 of it, and for 26 hours I played Warhammer.
Yeah,
basically.
That's crazy.
Like it's not that's not easy. Like it's a lot of Warhammer in 2 days. So 4 games a day is really tough, but
yeah.
I'm not going to complain. I won, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah. So next week we'll be starting up again on Monday. I have a stream game against Matthew. He wants to play Deathwatch against quote unquote Brandon Grant's list, which I can build, although I won't be able to run it like Brandon Grant, but I can build it. So that's going to be on stream next week. And we, of course, have Day of Blood this weekend, so the report from that will be out next week. And then I've got to build up some backlog because I'm away in Japan for 2 weeks, and probably nothing's going to happen for 2 weeks. So, and then after that, I'll be straight into CanHammer Team. So thanks very much for watching, guys. Thank you, Jim, for joining me again.
Anytime.
And we'll catch everybody later.